The technology industry is known for some of the titans of the industry and some of the forward-thinking thought leaders. And there's a lot of lessons we can learn from these tech titans. But what exactly are the biggest lessons I've learned from some of these tech titans? That's what I want to talk about here today. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world reach the third stage of digital transformation success. And one of the benefits of being in my role is that I get to meet a lot of founders and CEOs and leaders within the technology industry. I've interviewed a lot of them on my podcast called Transformation Ground Control, which you can learn more about by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. And in those interviews, both in person and in the podcast, I've learned a lot from these leaders. And what I wanted to do today is share with you some highlights of some of my conversations with some of the leading thought leaders in the technology space. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to invite you to learn a little bit more about Third Stage Consulting, who we are and what we do. I've included a link to a video right here that describes Third Stage in a bit more detail. It talks about our story, our history, our philosophy, our clients, our service offerings, and that sort of thing. But in general, what Third Stage Consulting does is we're an independent and tech-agnostic consulting provider. We help clients through their entire digital transformation life cycles, beginning with digital strategy, software evaluation and selection, all the way through and including implementation planning, implementation readiness, and the actual implementation itself. We're technology agnostic, so we only represent our clients' best interests. We do not represent software vendors. But having said that, we work very closely with software vendors, all the leading players that you can imagine we've worked with, both in helping clients evaluate and select them, but also in helping clients implement those solutions as well. So we have a very broad, objective, agnostic view of the market that is meant to really represent your interest as you go through your digital transformation. I also encourage you to scan this QR code right here to get access to our resource center. This resource center has a ton of information, a ton of ebooks that are free. You have access to top 10 software rankings, playbooks for how to make your project more successful, guides to change management, YouTube videos, all kinds of stuff that are going to help you through your digital transformation. So I encourage you to scan this QR code to get access to those resources. And please feel free to reach out to me directly to brainstorm ideas about your project. Even if it's just informally, you want to bounce around some ideas and get some informal advice, I'd be happy to spend some time with you. So feel free to reach out to me. I've included my contact information below. You can also find it in the description field of this video as well. One of the first tech titans I want to share with you here today is Evan Goldberg, who's the founder and CEO of NetSuite. And if you're not familiar with NetSuite, they're a software as a service product that started in the late 90s. They've been acquired by Oracle, and they focus their ERP efforts primarily on the small and mid-market. Over the years, they've started off as an upstart and a startup like a lot of tech companies do, but since it's become a powerhouse in more recent years in terms of really dominating the small and mid-market for ERP systems. And a lot of NetSuite customers are moving off of QuickBooks or some other basic finance and accounting system, and they find NetSuite to be a more robust offering for their solutions. So I recently had a chance to meet Evan at SuiteWorld in Las Vegas, but I also had a chance after that to have him on my podcast to have a deep dive interview. So what I want to do today is share with you a clip of my interview with him on my podcast, and if you'd like to watch the full interview, I've included a link to that below, and you can go check out the full podcast episode with that. But let's roll the clip with Evan Goldberg, the CEO and founder of NetSuite. So you start the company in 98, cloud-based solution. You're working with Larry Ellison. You called it NetLedger at first. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was sort of a failure of vision, I would say. I mean, because that was our first product, and it, very well described exactly what the initial customers were getting. But we snapped out of it once we started building the other capabilities like CRM and e-commerce. We're like, oh yeah, this is a lot more than NetLedger. So then we called the product NetSuite, kept the company name NetLedger. Then we got a new CEO. I moved into the chairman role and the chief technology officer role. And Zach Nelson, who was our longtime CEO over most of the history of the company, was immediately like, well, we need to call the company NetSuite. That's really what we do. And so we changed the name and it stuck.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, it does have a better ring, and it's more descriptive of what you guys do as well. So that was a good move. So Larry Ellison has a vision for the cloud. He obviously helped finance the company. Was he at all involved in the, in the management or the creation of the product or anything like that?
Well, okay, so certainly from a high level strategy perspective, he was involved, and I would meet with him and talk to him frequently. But the one time that he really dived into the product itself, probably about 2.5 years in, we announced a feature called the Executive Dashboard. And that was really my sort of dream feature. That was sort of really, for me at that time, the culmination of my vision, which was sort of one place, a page. You log into NetSuite and it would give you your key information that you needed to know, the key things that you needed to do, again, all in one place. So we announced this feature called the Executive Dashboard. And of course, every time we did any kind of announcement to the press, we were very good about including Larry Ellison's name in the information, right, which would help it get picked up. And so, so there's probably some article written and maybe his Google alert for stories that say Larry Ellison. I seriously doubt he has that. But in fact, I'm quite sure he doesn't. But somehow he got wind of this and he called me and he said, "Oh, you have this dashboard now. Okay, well, now I want to log in to NetSuite's account. And I'm going to actually use it." And so over the subsequent 2 months, so not only could he see how we were using his money, but he could also look at the dashboard. And so he basically became the product manager of the dashboard at that point. And he would call me every couple of days and say, "Here's what you need to do. You need to add this drop down that will allow you to change the periods of comparison on everything on the dashboard. You need to add this new chart that shows your performance in sales this month versus any previous similar time period." So I would dutifully, program that, or one of my team would, and then I'd call them and say, "Okay, try it now." It was much easier to release software back then.
Right.
And, that was a really fun time because we were really collaborating, at a deep kind of product level rather than just at the strategy level. And some of the things that he had us do survive to NetSuite to this very day, 20 plus years later.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, just put it in context for those that maybe weren't around in the late 90s when this was all happening.
Wait, were people that weren't around?
Yeah.
I constantly talk to the employees at NetSuite and I'm like, "This was before you were born." Or you were you were two at the time. You were probably playing with Beanie Babies at the time that this happened.
Right, exactly. And you were starting a software company while they were playing with Beanie Babies.
Exactly.
But if you put it in context, though, it sounds so simple now. Like, okay, big deal, executive dashboard. But that just was not even close to being a thing back in '98. I mean, back in '98, you had, in addition to Beanie Babies and the Macarena and all this pop culture stuff we just talked about, you also had green screens. That was still kind of the primary user interface. I had a green screen. I'd enter some sort of memorized transaction code. It wasn't even a GUI or a graphical user interface oftentimes. So these companies are using these really outdated systems, at least some of the bigger ones were. QuickBooks maybe wasn't so cumbersome, but point being that the executive dashboard is one page sort of thing that just wasn't a thing. And you guys created that, which is pretty cool back then.
Right. No, it was neat. And it was really, again, the culmination of a lot of work to allow you to do all these different functionalities, all these different capabilities, manage all these capabilities in your business that normally were disconnected and weren't tied together, like your sales process and your financial processes, and if you did e-commerce and your people processes, et cetera.
Right. I'm fascinated by the fact that you guys create this cloud solution. Remember the whole ASP movement, the application service provider movement? It sort of got a lot of hype.
Sometimes that would include us, but sometimes it was more like just running an on-premise application in a data center and giving you sort of remote access to that application, which was obviously different than what we were doing, which was sort of pure cloud.
Yeah. And that's where I was going with it. I remember that ASP model getting a bit of hype from analysts, and it seemed like, that might get some traction and take off. And it never really did, at least not in the early 2000s, whenever that was. How did you guys, you were built in the cloud, you stuck with the cloud, you never went on premise, you never, did you ever, I guess my question is, did you ever look at this ASP movement that sort of came and went, and on premise just stuck around for a long time, and in some pockets of the industry still is sticking around? But did you ever question the cloud, or was it ever frustrating that the cloud didn't take off sooner? Or like, how did you guys
Well, yeah,
persevere?
it was definitely frustrating. The way I remember it, we'd have to go to relatively conservative parts of the business because we were starting with the financials. And so we were talking to controllers and CFOs of fast growing companies, and they were maybe the most risk averse. And so convincing them to try this new thing and put their data on the internet could be a challenge. Now, typically what I'd do is I'd say, well, where's your data now? And they'd say, oh, it's in this computer over there in our closet with the coffee stain on it. And I'm like, you're not concerned that someone could steal that computer? It seems like it's not very secure. We keep our computers in this, modern data center where you need a handprint to get in. So that was step one. But often, we definitely rode the coattails of the Salesforce.com hype machine. And so, of course, many of these companies were also using Salesforce.com. And I'd say to the CFO, well, you know that your entire customer list and prospect list is already on the internet, and you're really worried that they want your income statement. So,
Right.
it certainly did help that the Mark and his marketing prowess was telling the world that you didn't need software. He called it no software, which we would laugh about a little bit behind the scenes because we'd be like, well, feels like we're developing software, but apparently not. But that was, in effect, one of those effective, not completely accurate slogans, but that captured people's attention and got people to think about, maybe I don't want to manage software, and maybe I want someone else to do it for me. Maybe this stuff really should be a service. I mean, one of the most revolutionary things about the whole cloud movement for business software is, and we realized it very early on, just months into the company, we were months into our product. Our first product was released less than a year from when we started the company. And a few months later, we're upgrading customers to the next version. And there's some problems with the upgrade. And we're having like the typical problems that a customer normally had to have. And that's when it occurred to us, oh, we're delivering a service. Like they need us to be doing this all the time, 24/7. Customers would come in with problems with their e-commerce site on like Christmas Eve, and we had to fix them because we were a service. We weren't just writing software and throwing it over the wall and daring them to install it and run it. So in that sense, Mark's slogan was right. It was no longer software, it was a service, and thus the name Software as a Service.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, that's a big cultural shift, I imagine, too, for a bunch of techies and developers and people that are used to
Absolutely.
creating
Yeah.
software, not a service.
Well, and fortunately, we got over that quite quickly, and there were only a few of us. So changing the culture from a product to a service was quite easy, and then has sort of imbued, our DNA ever since then.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's interesting now because, I always mention this to potential buyers of enterprise tech, especially ones that are enamored by the cloud or SaaS solutions, and they might be looking at, SAP or Microsoft Dynamics or whatever, in addition to potentially NetSuite. And it's always, you always have to say, look at how the software is built. Are you really getting a cloud solution with many of your competitors, with a lot of the ERP vendors out there? Are you really getting a cloud solution, or are you getting an on-premise system that they're trying to move to the cloud as we speak, and they're selling it as a cloud solution? Whereas with NetSuite, you know what you're getting, for better or for worse. You know exactly what you're getting with NetSuite. It was built in the cloud. It's not, you're not trying to make that transition now like a lot of software vendors are.
Yeah, no, that's true. And users won't necessarily see it superficially because they're using it in a browser and they're like, oh, this is a cloud solution. But when you sort of, build a cloud solution with, shoestring and bubble gum, and really under the covers, it was architected to be on premise, what you end up with is, for example, people on many different versions. And what that means is that just stifles innovation. Obviously, you don't get access to the latest capabilities until you're willing to, upgrade. And so that, the speed of upgrades, the speed with which we can make sure that everybody gets all the innovation that we're doing is due to the fact that we really have truly we're running one system in the cloud. We're not running a bunch of different versions. We're not running a bunch of different things for different customers. So on the surface, you might not see these differences between the architecture on the surface, but you'll see them ultimately in your experience of using these different products.
So that's just a partial clip of Evan talking about his history and background and the evolution of NetSuite. The reason I like talking to Evan so much is not only is he a great guy to converse with and a smart guy, but also because it's fascinating to me how he and Larry Ellison knew back in 1998 that cloud systems would one day take over the world. And they bet heavily on that, and it turns out they were right. So it's really interesting to hear how 25 years ago, before cloud systems even had a name, NetSuite and Evan Goldberg and Larry Ellison were creating a product that would really create this whole category of cloud systems. Another tech leader that I've enjoyed getting to know over the years is Steve Murphy, who's the CEO of Epicor. And if you're not familiar with Epicor, you can find out more about them right here. And while I was filming this video in Austin at Epicor's headquarters, I got to spend some time with Steve Murphy. And in that time, I got to learn about some of the product roadmap and the overall strategy of Epicor. And this is fascinating to me because Epicor is a product that's been around for a long time, especially in the manufacturing and distribution space. It's been a solid tier 2 ERP solution for years now, but it's just more recent that I feel like Epicor has really sort of turned the corner in terms of really investing heavily in the product as well as in their overall implementation ecosystem. And they've also assembled a very strong leadership team, in my opinion. So it's great to get to know Steve, and I'd love to share with you this interview that I had with him while I was in Austin meeting with him. So Steve, you're CEO of the company.
Yes.
You've been here for what, 5 years, 6 years?
6 years. 6 years.
Well, congratulations. It's
Thank you.
More than a lot of CEOs make it. And
That's true.
what is it you're focused on here at the company? What can we expect from Epicor here in the next, say, 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I think that from a focus perspective, the best thing that I can do is look outward. So when I say look outward, it's really stay in touch with our customers and make sure that they're thrilled with the product. And if we can do that, we'll continue to be very successful. And when I say thrilled, it's not an exaggeration because it's not good enough for our products to be good. They have to be great because we compete against the biggest software companies in the world. Right. So that's the big area of focus for me.
Right. Now you guys are focused a lot on M&A growth as well as organic growth, but tell us a little bit about that growth strategy on both sides of the equation there.
Yeah, we do both. Most of our growth is organic, so we invest in R&D and we spend about 12% of revenue on R&D. But having said that, we'll deploy more capital over the next year to M&A in all likelihood than R&D. And in most cases, it is a customer request or something a customer's asked for where they say, we really think we'd like to buy this product if you had it, but it's got to be from a look and feel and integration perspective. Again, it's got to be holistic, it's got to be integrated into the user interface, and it's got to be something that we know our customers will really value. So in some cases, you could take a Steve Jobs that says, the customer doesn't know what they want until I tell them they want it. We don't see it that way. We think in most cases, our customers with their ERP system, they know what they want. And we really try to listen and meet those needs. And in some cases, it makes a lot more sense to buy it than make it. And in some cases, it makes more sense to make it. So that's the choice for us.
Right. That kind of leads into the whole best of breed versus single ERP system. So you have two strategies that are not mutually exclusive that you can pursue. You can build technology that's integrated end-to-end within one system, or you can go acquire different systems in a best of breed approach or some sort of hybrid. What's your general philosophy on that, or your general strategy going forward?
Yeah, great question, and you and I have seen this one come and go. What I will say is that for make, move, and sell, it's somewhat specialized. Whether it's a manufacturing plant or a high-volume distribution center or a retail operation that may even have a fleet of service vehicles, there is a real desire for deep functionality. So best of breed, to a certain extent, has been winning the day, and it's one of the reasons we're successful. Also true that they expect the ERP backbone to connect easily to anything and everything. So that's probably one of the bigger changes in the last 5 to 10 years is with the cloud, you can get both. You can get best of breed that easily integrates into whatever else you might have in a way that you can get the reports you want, or you can get the productivity tools you want, or you get a look and feel that's easy and runs well on a device. But overall for us, we've seen best of breed continue to be the deciding factor when it comes to the make, move, and sell economy, which is where we do our business.
Right. Yep. So that leads to another topic here, which is implementations themselves. You talked a lot about the product and how you're growing the product suite and acquisitions and things of that nature. the implementations themselves, obviously that's just as important, arguably, maybe even more important than the product itself. So what are you guys doing to build out that ecosystem and to support partners and people that can help sell and deliver and implement the products that you're developing?
It's a huge deal. And when you think about the requirement of getting the software up and running, the customer has expectations that that's going to be done quickly and that they're going to get everything they want. So it's an area of focus for us. I think that the customer experience, to the point you just made, is probably the new competitive battleground as much as product, if not more. And for us to build the ecosystem is important and continues to be a big area of focus. If you think about it, if there aren't people out there that are skilled engineers and process people that know Epicor, we can't succeed. So we continue to recruit, spend money, and invest in partnerships and product that attract people to that ecosystem. And it's something we're having a lot more success with than we did 6 years ago. I'm not going to take any credit for it. What I will say is, with scale and user adoption, we get a stronger and stronger ecosystem. And it's quantity and quality. Some of it is just flat out investing in a channel, making sure they get a good cut, they make money on the Epicor deal. And then some of it is ensuring that they're certified and they're skilled, and when they show up, they really know our product and the customers are happy with it. But it continues to be a big area of focus. I will underscore one more time, you're probably right, that it is at least as big an issue as product.
What about internationally? I get a lot of questions from prospective clients and just people in the community that are asking about certain parts of the world, Middle East or Africa, asking, is Epicor relevant in our regions? Do we have a partner network here? Is there an ecosystem to support us? What is your view of the global strategy?
Yeah, so we definitely are relevant, depending on the region, some more relevant than others. But for instance, if it's the United Kingdom, or it's Western Europe, or it's Australia, New Zealand, or some of the more populated areas of Asia like Hong Kong, Singapore, parts of China, Guangzhou, Shanghai, we have a big presence and we've got a significant ecosystem there to rely on. Every once in a while, if somebody in a faraway place wants to buy the product and there's no ecosystem, I would be the first person to tell them, hey, we need to figure that out ahead of time, because that's a big deal. But we've grown dramatically internationally. Our SaaS business has increased more than 15-fold since I started as far as our international business. Wow. So it's grown, it's a 9-figure business, well into the 9 figures.
Right. What are you most excited about? Like, if you look at the future of Epicor and the industry in general, Epicor's position in the industry, what are you most excited about? It's
an exciting time, and what I would say I'm most excited about is we have built and continue to build a company that has enduring value and is growing at a rapid clip. So continuing to do more of the same, which is build products customers love and products that are better than the competition, in some cases a lot better than the competition, and continue to invest in our customers in a way that they're thrilled with who we are and what we do. I think the other thing would be a culture where people want to work here and they want to stay and make it a career. We've got to promote from within so that anybody who comes to work here has a real career path. That's a big deal to me, and that's not a minor thing. That takes a lot of work. Yeah, so Eric, I think that continuing to build a company of enduring value, have it be a great place to work, and have products that our customers love. Like isn't good enough. They have to love our products, is what makes me excited. And I fully intend to keep doing that. And it is exciting. It's an exciting time in this business. And we're seeing growth rates we just haven't seen before. And I think we've got a tailwind that's going to keep those going for a while. Yeah, lots of opportunity out there for sure. What keeps you up at night when you think about that future and realizing that value or that vision of where you're headed? I think it's mostly the 4,300 employees we have. We've got people who rely on this company for their livelihood. It's their full-time job. And I do feel a lot of responsibility to make sure that we do well enough as a company that we can pay them well, they're treated well, they get respect when they work here, they've got a career. We pay out a bonus annually, and it's my intent that we should always pay that bonus at 100% or more, and not every year. It's not always easy to do that. So making sure that our employees have a great job, a stable work environment, and want to be here, that's probably the biggest thing. The next thing would be I've got a board that I'm accountable to, and they need to feel like the company's being well run and that they're getting at least the return they expect. And if they're getting that, they generally are highly supportive of what we're doing. And we're definitely firing on all cylinders, but I still wake up in the middle of the night thinking about all of those things, and don't stay awake for too long. We're doing well enough that I tend to get a good night's sleep, but occasionally, perseverate over those topics. But people and the people who work here would be the thing I think the most about.
Great. Well, it's a good, I don't want to say it's a good problem to have, but it's a great area to focus on and make sure it doesn't become a problem. So that's a good.
That's right. The payback's big for focusing on that, that's for sure.
So what I love about talking to Steve and learning more about Epicor is that Epicor is not trying to be everything to everyone. They've really focused in on where their strengths are, and they've invested heavily in those areas. So it's great to see a tech titan that isn't trying to be everything to everyone. They're not trying to dominate the entire world, but they are focusing on some very specific niches, and they're doing a great job of it. Next, I want to introduce you to Kevin Samuelson, who is the CEO of Infor. And Infor, if you don't know, is a solid player in the Tier 2 market. They have a product called CloudSuite, which is widely used among mid-size and even larger manufacturing and distribution organizations. And getting to know Kevin has been great because he has a unique leadership style, unique personality, and he has some pretty interesting thoughts on the strategy of the company. I recently had a chance to sit down with Kevin in person at Infor's global headquarters in New York City. So let's go ahead and roll that clip.
The highest level, the way we think about it is, ERP runs the most important processes for all of our customers in our core industries. And yet, when we look at the market and when we meet with customers, a lot of what we hear is, we love the potential of ERP. We know there's a lot of value there, but my gosh, the cost, pain, and risk to implement software is so difficult. Then the opportunity to take that software and allow it to continue to be flexible and add value over time is such a hurdle that there's got to be a better way to deploy and use ERP. And so our entire strategy is, how do we take on those massive challenges in the industry so that we can create and deliver software that's easy to deploy, adds value, and is agile enough to adapt as companies need it to as their markets and industries change.
Right.
And that's what we're here to do, and think there's a unique opportunity to do and deliver software very differently that we want to take advantage of.
Yeah. How does that compare or contrast to what other software vendors are doing in the marketplace, and how do you fit against those other competitors and vendors?
Yeah, so it's drastically different on a number of different fronts. Number one, we have a core belief that to really do something different in ERP, you have to be very industry focused. Now, it's in vogue to say industry focused, but let me describe what that really means to us. It starts with the product. We don't write one ERP platform and try to sell it into every single industry. We write an ERP platform for a very select number of industries, and that means that every single feature, function, configuration is set up so it can be deployed very quickly in an industry. We have the actual best practice capabilities and processes pre-configured in the product. We can then attach RPA and other things onto that. So by being industry focused, it starts with a product all the way through from feature function to deployment. Our individual people are also experts in those industries. So from sales to delivery to support, our teams only focus on a few specific industries. So our belief is, by massively changing how we build a product, how we deliver it, how we support it, with a lot of industry knowledge, that can really unlock a lot of value, deploy more quickly, and like I said, allow for more agility over time.
So you're not taking a one-size-fits-all approach. You're taking more of an industry-focused approach to the different applications you guys deploy.
You got it. I mean, we are laser focused on 7 industries, healthcare in the US, and then a few in discrete manufacturing, a few in process manufacturing. And we're all in on those. And that's a big, big differentiation point relative to the alternatives.
Right. Now, Coke has been a big investor in the company, not the beverage company Coke, like that's right. Private equity venture capital firm. How has that affected that investment from Coke? How has that affected your strategy going forward?
It's been an enormous unlock for us as it relates to strategy. And I'll give you a couple of very specifics. The first is, Coke is private and very large and very well capitalized. And I think one of the challenges in the industry as a whole is customers buy our software and their customers for 10 or 20 years. And the challenge is, in a public environment, you've got these quarters, and every quarter you've got to post a sales number. And that requires, from our perspective, a lot of sort of unnatural things to get things sold that maybe aren't in the best interest of customers. And our ability to be able to think long-term, to make much larger investments, and to partner with our customers and do what's in their best interests we think allows us to do all sorts of things differently, from how we build our software, how we sell it, of course, how we deploy it, how we add value over time. And that wouldn't be possible without being private with lots and lots of capital, and not just the ability, but the encouragement to make big bets and challenge the status quo. And it's an unbelievably unique organization that allows us to do that.
Yeah, and scale faster, ultimately, I imagine.
No question. Yeah. Absolutely.
Great. So where do you see Infor headed in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, we're definitely headed for great things. I think we spent billions of dollars completely rewriting our products into those industry-specific suites that are multi-tenant enabled, that offer the latest technology. That was a big bet that we made. Those were completed a couple of years ago. We've had really dramatic growth in our SaaS business as a result. We've put a lot into everything from our culture to how we're organized to how we deploy differently. And just from our advantage, just at the very beginning of seeing all of that pay off. And if you kind of look at history, every time there's a big change in technology, so think mainframe to client server or client server to the cloud, there's a complete change in leadership. You probably can't name any of the mainframe players that were around because they were all taken out by the client server players. A lot of other elements in software, other areas, same thing has happened. Cloud companies have come along and displaced the legacy client server companies. We think ERP is sort of at that stage where there is an opportunity for someone to disrupt the status quo. And we're obviously biased, but we think with the big investments, the differentiated strategy, the ability to make big bets, we're in a position to now do that. And so we're super optimistic about the next few years.
Yeah, sounds exciting.
Definitely.
What about the things that keep you up at night as you look to execute this strategy going forward? What are the biggest risks you see? What keeps you up at night?
A lot of things keep me up at night. But, I think I feel great about where we are with the products. Like I said, I feel great about our ability to do things that are long-term. I still think the biggest opportunity that exists is how do we make sure that the entire experience for a customer is seamless? And the way I think us and most software companies are set up is you've got an engineering team and a sales team and a services team. But that's not really the way that customers want to experience the software experience. And so how do we better organize our structure, but frankly, how do we better further our culture to make sure that us and our teams are thinking about that entire customer journey and become much more seamless to work with?
Right.
Like general view is if we've got the deep industry knowledge, we really understand opportunity, we've got the advantage products and technology, that final piece that I think we're still working to optimize is how do we just change that overall experience, which with 17,000 people and thousands of customers, that's a big lift. But I think that's what keeps me up at night because I feel like that's a big unlock that we still have in front of us.
Now, what's really interesting about Infor is that Infor has had such an aggressive acquisition strategy over the years. And it's interesting to hear from Kevin how they're integrating some of those systems and not necessarily trying to replace all of those legacy systems and force everyone onto one platform. Instead, they're kind of rolling with the idea that there's different solutions that are meant for different situations, which is a breath of fresh air, in my opinion, in the enterprise technology space. Another tech titan that I've gotten to know in recent years is Jan Baan, who is the founder of Baan ERP software. And Baan software was actually started back in the 1970s, and they, in many ways, created this whole category of ERP software. When Baan came around in the late 70s, I don't think ERP really had a name at the time. And in the early days of ERP systems, Baan was the gold standard. Baan was the number one market share long before SAP came around. And then, of course, SAP in the 90s sort of took over that top spot. And Baan continues to this day to be owned and operated by Infor. And we just spoke with Kevin Samuelson from Infor. And one of the acquisitions that Infor had made many years ago is the acquisition of Baan. And that system to this day still exists, although it exists in other systems at this point. So I had the opportunity to interview Jan Baan in my podcast, not only to talk about the evolution of Baan and sort of his history starting Baan, but also hearing his really interesting thoughts about where the ERP software market is headed in the future. And to me, that's the most interesting part of the conversation. So we'll roll you a partial clip here of the conversation with Jan Baan from my podcast. But again, if you want to watch the full interview, I encourage you to check out the links below. How did you know, or why did you think at the time that the cloud
I was an early bird in WebEx. There was no one. Webex was a small company, Silicon Valley. I helped them in the IPO process. I invested 50 million, 60 million, later on more, and I allowed them to do freemium. And even Zoom was not there when I invested in Webex, because they sold it to Cisco, and then Eric came from there and started Zoom. Now, I was the early bird there, and I saw Webex as a business tool, as more a tool to see the web meeting as a war room for the business. That was my drive. And then I learned, and in Baan, I see what you see when a company, I was on that moment, when we did IPO, I had 60%. But on the moment, I maybe the biggest shareholder, but still 35% or so. But I have a board and management. But management, in my opinion, I've given them too much freedom. They moved more from customer intimacy to M&A, and I should say more filling the pockets with selling divested shares. Now, that is, I make my mistake from in the beginning focusing on customer intimacy, and too much I was naive and let them go in what I call shareholders value. But then I learned shareholders, there are no shareholders, because I did not understand them. You should call them share movers, because no one is holding. And it's a problem. I was so naive, I was thinking these people are for life with me, but no, they're gambling with you. Now, and that's the element, the challenge with the VCs, etc., is kind of real, not so attractive for the disruptive innovation. And therefore I quit. And with my Webex knowledge and top tier knowledge, top tier was the first XML portal. Later on, I sold it to SAP. We sold it for 400 million to SAP to replace their NetWeaver. And it was also tremendous technology. I was founded already, but I saw it was not complete enough. And it was not consumerized enough. And then we moved what we today see, like the REST API, like infrastructure as a service, like what you see in Google, in Amazon, etc. Now, the middleware layer for ERP is thinking, I'm saying often. It's not, it's architectural, done by the knowledge of the last century of ERP, but not done with a native cloud. Now, that is what I learned. To start again in the cloud, you have to do a totally other way of thinking than in on-premise transactional ERP.
Right.
And realize, Eric, everything is stored in the transaction and is stored in concrete. Now, in BPM, the rules were already decoupled, and 1 second before the transaction you could change the rules. Now, in MRP, it's too much stored in concrete. And you have no choice. I put the process through your throat.
Right.
That was the biggest, limitation. Is it on ERP? But so far good enough if it is backend, but not good enough if it goes downstream.
Right. That's very interesting. I wish I could say that back in 1998, I too predicted the advent of the cloud, but I did not. I was still trying to figure out what ERP software was.
I worked with the guys of I2 also, but they were more on the rule engines.
Right. Interesting. So what about Vanderburg, the company you founded? You're CEO of a company called Vanderburg right now. What can you tell us about Vanderburg, and what are you up to these days?
In Vandenberg, I had a castle, the Vandenberg. It was my also my holding company. But then in the mid of when I started BPM, we had this BPM layer, and I had even another investor in it. But I invested something new, what we call the beginning of microservices, and we built it already in the mid 90s, say in 2005 or so anywhere. And then my board was a little afraid in what we did, and I decided that okay, let me take it again, and I bought it private back, and I called it to my castle and therefore I call it Vandenberg, and it was my third startup. After BPM, we moved then to the second part of the internet.
Right.
And that was the beginning even of the workflow, because in Cordis I built silos. Sorry, in Baan I built silos. In Cordis I built processes to the inbound enterprise, but there is no supply chain. Even today there's no supply chain because you are not collaborative, you're not dynamic. Now, then we moved to the workflow, and that's a part of the supply chain, to the collaborative workflow.
Interesting. So when you say you built silos at Baan, are you talking about modules? Like it was a module-based modular
Yeah,
system?
yeah, we did it already nice, but the problem is the good thing is we have a unique point where no one came there. We had a custom order decouple point. And in the custom order decouple point, you could decouple everything, every type of engineer to order, make to stock. And we decoupled it after the warehouse layer on the latest moment. No one did it before. That have given the Baan the unique element, and we had our dynamic enterprise modeling where you did even the implementation stuff on the same element. That was unique, and every component was decoupled, and we built our famous Baan shell. Now, the Baan shell is now still executing in Infor everything to the internet. That means in internet, maybe Infor is the only one who takes the same source code, the same functionality immediately in the cloud, because they have not to replace the code. The code was executed with a Baan shell to CPU, called the CPU now the internet. It was database independent, and it was operating system independent, called the operating system now infrastructure as a service. And they were able to connect it to Amazon like they before connected to Unix.
Interesting.
And there is Infor is still amazing today, and simpler. If that's the reason I was amazed that my old Baan product is still in the top of the ERP. Now,
Yeah.
and it is simpler than Oracle and then SAP to implement the complex variety of business processes in the enterprise.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It is amazing that the product is still around and a lot of companies still using Baan. And I know Infor has been supporting it now for some time now.
Yep.
So rewinding back to 1978, you said you started Baan?
Yeah.
So 1978, you start a company called Baan. Why did you start the
Not
company?
Not Baan. I started a consulting company. I was a bookkeeper and maybe a controller. And then I came by accident in Silicon Valley in 81, 82. And I was selling already some microcomputers from a company called Durango in San Jose. And then I was the first one who sold this stuff what normally was used by toys, by Apple, etc. They used by toys. We use already an 8-bit 64K machine in multitasking, multi-user in the 80s, in 82. Now, and then I came at home by the CEO of Durango, and the guy saying, I'm now going to Unix. I say, oh, then I have to go to Unix. And then we built our famous Baan shell from that moment. But it was always done on, I think, state-of-the-art technology. All my competitors like ASK were on minis. And we were the only one who were on microcomputers, and then we adopted the microcomputers. We adopt Unix from the beginning. Like today, Linux, Unix. We never went in .NET. I see it. Unix was far more professional on it, and Unix have given us all the power to build this stuff like the Baan shell. Now, we were in tools like Progress, but we were not selling the tools. But the tools were integrated by the application developers. That was unique elements. Right. Then I moved to India, and our real success is that I was already in the mid-80s in India, and very soon I had 1,000 engineers, where 10 years later, no one was even there. SAP, Oracle, they were even in the first 10 years not in India. Now, then there I have in-depth technology with top people. I pay them extremely high salary, but it was in rupees, and I was selling the product in dollars and in euros. Now, and I trust them. That was also the other secret. The secret in Baan was that we were more an Indian company and link them together.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I mean, another trend that you saw before the rest of the world did, which is very impressive. And if you look back at your time in the enterprise technology space so far, not just with Baan, but with the BPM company and now with Vanderburg, what are some of the biggest lessons that you have from the industry, and what might you do differently if you could go back and do it over again?
First of all, often you sometimes underestimate yourself, and too much I maybe have given authorization out of my hands and have given it in the hands of the managers. And they have a different view. I mentioned already, they're looking to the short term. And disruptive innovation sometimes takes you 10 years before you're there. And you have to be patient and do it this one. It's perseverance, not give up. And most go back, customer intimacy is the most important one. Focus and too much I make my mistakes and even allow them to go to shareholders value and all the other stuff, etc. If greed is drive you, And if it's only the money, then it's not joyful, but that is the most dangerous part in it. And we overestimate because we are only down to earth, we are manufacturers. I learned what I do is a manufacturing process, and not so many people are doing it. I have the bill of material with all these components. I'm composing this one. I learned from Boeing and everything that I have to be like them, a manufacturer. What I did, decoupling, late binding, and all the manufacturing principles. I built that, I call it my own software factory. Now, and that is what we did in India. And again, learn again to go now more to UX and go more to user. In the beginning, we ignore too much the user. That's the problem. What we see with ERP, it's too much generic. My innovation is what you have to do. But now we move to mass customizing. To some elements, we make it generic, like a mobile. But on the same moment, it's becoming specific. And the power is, an enterprise should not be the same. Porter expected that with new technology, we can be all different, but we all coming the same, like Fleming in SAP and use the same functionality. And there's no differentiator. Now, we should destroy this. And we should say, take only a generic part. Like in a car, some things are generic, but your dashboard is specific. And it is a decouple point and bring it there.
So that's Jan Baan, the founder of Baan Software, sharing some of his thoughts on the ERP software space. And I'll be honest, after completing that interview with him, my head was spinning. It was so full of stuff that I didn't know, and he got me thinking about ERP technologies in a whole new way. So if you like that little clip you saw right there, I highly encourage you to check out the full interview because it's really good. It's one of the best interviews that I've done in my podcast. Another leader that I've had the good fortune of getting to know and interviewing is Lisa Pope, who's the president of Epicor. Earlier in this video, we spoke with Steve Murphy from Epicor, who's the CEO of Epicor, and Lisa is the president. And she's primarily in charge of growth and some of the strategic initiatives of Epicor. And Lisa's really interesting because not only does she have a key leadership role at Epicor, but she's also a woman in technology, which is more rare than it should be. But she also has worked with several different software vendors and has a very broad understanding of different software vendors, having spent time at some of the leading ERP providers prior to joining Epicor. So my conversation with Lisa was at their headquarters in Austin, and it's a very interesting one. So let's roll that clip here. So you guys are growing a lot globally. Tell us a little bit about your expansion plans for now and in the future.
Yeah, I think we've had dramatic growth over the last 5 years internationally, and it's been a big part of our overall growth strategy. We've got a lot of opportunity there. We've got the ability still to bring new products overseas, right? We've recently moved our Profit 21 product to be sold overseas, as well as our BizTrack product for lumber and building materials. So in the past, we've been predominantly focused on just selling our manufacturing solutions. So we've got the ability to continue to release more of our product lines over in Europe and overseas, and then in addition, just additional scale by the geographies, right? So we obviously have strong presence in LATAM, in the UK. We've got the ability really to expand through a lot of the European countries and continue to do more expansion in Asia as well as India. So we look at both the product side and the geography side, and both of those I think are big areas. Right. Also, we've done international, I think, very smart in terms of we've really let our customers sort of help prioritize international for us, right? So many companies now are global, right? Even a small company today can start e-commerce and all of a sudden be global overnight. So for us, as customers have expanded and have gone more global, then we're wanting to make sure that we stay ahead of that and that we're there to support them in the countries that they're operating. So we've been able to sort of scale that expansion, appropriately. Right. And then finally, acquisitions, right? So one of the things we're always looking for is areas that complement our business. And so we have definitely been looking for acquisitions internationally that will sort of add to our scale and our product capability. We purchased Data Interchange. They're an EDI provider, very involved and very well known in Europe, and that's a good example of sort of adding to our capability globally with a specific acquisition.
Right. Now, growing the company successfully obviously depends on a solid product, but also a solid network of partners that can not only sell the product, but implement the product. In the past, one of the problems I think Epicor has had is that they didn't have a strong VAR and partner network, going back 10 years. or so, I think that was a challenge for the company in its growth. It focused a lot on the product, but not enough on the implementation network. What are you guys doing differently now that you're here and others from your team are here? What are you doing to address that, and how are you building out that ecosystem?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. You know, when I got here, we had a channel, but it wasn't well organized. We didn't have a lot of enablement to sort of, you know, keep those partners educated and really focused on staying very committed to Epicor. So we saw a lot of churn. So one of the first things we did is we really did establish a partner and a channel environment, right? We gave them a specific territory to focus on, in some cases specific industries where they had specialization where they could focus, and made it very available and had market areas that they could then sort of get some market share in and really succeed. We expanded, brought in a couple of key people to run both of our influencer and our strategic alliances, as well as someone to run and really grow our channel. And that starts with definitely enablement. It's making sure that they're trained, that they're supported, that there's, you know, leads flowing to them, right, and that those leads are protected, right? That's where you get into a lot of issues, is sort of channel conflict. And then also working with our direct teams to understand how a channel can help. And so by raising sort of a bar that our channel can play in, what that also allowed us to do is take our direct resources, and instead of sort of saturating one market, we've been able now to take our direct sales force and really move into upper mid-market and lower enterprise, because we have a stronger channel now that can cover, you know, that SMB and lower mid-market. So we definitely have plans to continue to expand that. Obviously in international, we're a very, very strong partner channel, so we're definitely leveraging a lot of those best practices back here in the Americas to drive that same kind of revenue share. But I think lots of opportunity, not just with partners to sell the software, but as you mentioned, implementation partners. So we've definitely been looking at strategic system integrators to assist us. We're working with a number of consulting firms that do business process work. And again, as we move into larger customers, they definitely want, you know, more choice, more capability. But I think for our core market, you know, the idea that Epicor sold and serviced and, you know, basically supported the client, there's a lot of value in that. It does differentiate us from some of our competition, because for a big piece of our market, they are able to come to Epicor, and Epicor really can do a lot. But to your point, there are areas of the market that we really did need to sort of improve our ecosystem. And we've definitely made huge gains in that in the last 5 years, and especially this next year, lots of expansion plans there.
Right. So looking not just at next year, but say the next 5 years, what are you most excited about, and where do you see the company going here in the next few years?
You know, there's so much opportunity at Epicor. I definitely still think there's more opportunity at the upper end, right? Because we've been very successful growing into that space with our base, right? So, you know, I have one of our strategic customers, when we sold them 3 years ago, was $2.7 billion. We met with them, you know, a couple weeks ago, and now they're almost $12 billion. Their 3-year plan is to be $20 billion. So, you know, if you'd said, let's go sell a $20 billion company, I'd probably say, well, is that really in our spot? But when you evolve with the customer and you're able to scale with them, now that we've done it, we're kind of at a point where, like, well, now we're getting invited to compete on a lot more larger opportunities, because we have such a large, strong reference. And so we've been able to sort of move into that space, you know, again, sort of at a pace that allowed us to scale it, not try to make something happen. So I think that's exciting to me. We're getting a lot of market perception at that higher end, and obviously those clients are important to us. With industry consolidation, you don't want to not focus on the upper end, because ultimately they are purchasing a lot of the companies, you know, in the mid-market. Right. And then I think the other thing that's really exciting to me is sort of that the SMB and that channel space. I see tremendous opportunity for us to continue to grow channels, especially vertical specific areas where we can have channel partners really bring extra expertise. So I think on both sides we've got tremendous opportunity.
Yeah. So when you think about that opportunity, there's risk along the way, and there's growing pains and challenges. What keeps you up at night? You know, what are the things that keep you up at night?
Yeah, I think for me the main thing is the whole culture shift from selling software and saying, okay, here, we'll implement it for you, and now we leave and you run it, right? That's the old sort of software methodology, and clearly in a SaaS environment, that relationship's changed, right? We don't leave. We stay, we're still running the software. In effect, we are running the company's backbone for them so that they can focus on their customers and their products. And so it's a very different relationship. And I think we've made huge strides inside the company, first of all, to change the culture and the mindset that we're not selling software, we are providing a mission-critical service for our clients. And so that concept of sense of urgency and making sure that you have the customer's best interest and how would this affect them if they're running 7x24 globally, right? Or you're at Ace Hardware on a Sunday when the line is out the door. How do we make sure that that they can take an order on a self-service device and whatever they may need to make sure that they can handle that kind of volume. So for us, that culture shift has certainly started within the company. But that's a big area I'll be focusing as well, especially this next year, is a customer experience, really strategic initiative to continue to drive that change in our processes and the way we think, and really evolving to a service-based philosophy, and understanding the mission-critical nature of what we do in this make, move, sell, because our customers are all essential. They're all, providing significant service to, the rest of the world, and so they're not, they're not businesses that can shut down, and so it's a lot of responsibility, but in a good way.
Right.
I think it's we have a really unique brand that is very focused on that essential marketplace, and so there's a purpose associated with that.
Right. So that's the in-person interview I did with Lisa. I also had the opportunity to interview Lisa on my podcast, and so there's a more detailed interview that I did with her there. You can find a link to that in the description below of this video. So another person I've had the opportunity to interview is Fabian Pinckaers, who's the CEO and founder of Odoo. And if you're not familiar with Odoo, they're the leading open source ERP software provider. They're based in Brussels, Belgium, and they've really sort of created a whole new niche within the ERP space. And it's a very unique product, a very unique offering, and really interesting one too, by the way. Not a great fit for every organization out there, but for some organizations, it can be a really good fit. And so I had the opportunity to interview Fabian on my podcast, so I'll play you a partial clip of that here.
His question is, what is open source software? And basically, open source means that it's a software that you can download, that you can modify, that you can change for free. And it's guaranteed that it's free from the license. So basically, it's come from the idea that knowledge should be shared, that we shouldn't create lock in our customers or on the software. So it's basically free and guaranteed by the license. Free to use, free to modify, free to distribute, and but having said that, the service is not free. From the rest, the service is like traditional software. So what differs from the traditional ERP is actually not that much. It's just another license. And for the rest of the service, so like the way you implement software or the way the software evolves from the software vendor perspective, the research and development is actually the same. The only difference is that we work with communities all around the world, but we have the same quality development cycle than traditional vendors, where we host our own core base and we modify it.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, so it's a bit different from ERP solutions in that way. But
so I still don't see you, Eric. Okay,
so
he's asking a question.
How
is open source different from low-code or custom dev solutions? So basically, open source is just a way to produce software. It's not a business model. The business model is the same than traditional software. It's just a way to work better with the communities and open to the world with a more open approach to everything we do and more transparent. A low-code approach is just having a framework that allows to customize the system without development. And we have that with Odoo too. We have an application that it's called Odoo Studio that allows you to customize all your application without development. So we do both open source and we do also have a low-code solution where you can customize your own application or develop your own application without development. That's very useful to adapt the software to a lot of different clients without going in very highly expensive budget, because development always costs a lot. Odoo is not fully open source. It's what we call an open core business model, where you have part of the software that is free, open source, which is Odoo Community. It's one of our products. And we have another product, which is Odoo Enterprise, which is for a fee. And so 80% only of the features we have are open source. We still have 20% of our features that are for a fee. So it's a mixed model between proprietary software and open source software.
Okay, so that's a good overview of how open source systems like Odoo are different from off-the-shelf ERP systems, and also how it's different from low-code or custom developed solutions. How does an organization know if an open source solution like Odoo is a good fit? What kind of organizations do you find that Odoo is a better fit for than others?
I think organizations don't care about open source and shouldn't care about open source. I mean, open source is just a license. You don't choose your ERP or business apps based on the license. The license is important, but it's not what matters. What matters is that does it do the job for you? Is it complete? Does it cover all you need out of the box? So it's more about comparing product. Open source, in my opinion, is not a value for the end user. It's just a better way to produce software. The value for the end user is comparable with traditional ERP. And because we have this fast development model, we could get to a better value for our clients. But ultimately, what matters for the end user is not that it's open source, because at the end, he does like every other proprietary software. He pays a subscription. He has an implementation service company that does the service. He has warranties on his bug fix and his support. So at the end, it's the same. It's just that we have a better way to produce software in a much faster way, because as you can see with the evolution of Odoo, in just a few years, we are now talking in millions of users. Where when I started, the VCs told me you need 30 days to do an ERP, 30 years, sorry, to do an ERP. And we just did it in a short period of time because of this open and transparent approach.
Right. That's interesting. So what is it, how often do customers make significant changes to Odoo? You know, in that open source environment, one of the benefits I would think is that it has the flexibility to be able to modify the software, change the code. How often do customers actually do that versus just using it the way it's originally built?
So our approach is very similar to the traditional software, where we try to minimize development. Every partner has its own approach, so every implementation service company has its own approach. Some prefer to develop more, others prefer to develop less. We, as a software vendor, we recommend usually more standard implementation based on best practices rather than trying to redo everything. The good thing with Odoo is that we cover so much in standard that we go much further than the traditional ERP just out of the box. So we need less development than traditional software. Like traditional software, they don't do e-commerce, or they don't do business intelligence, or they do with different products that you have to integrate, so it costs a lot. They don't do point of sales. They don't go on social marketing. And with Odoo, all those things are completely out of the box. So when we usually answer to a large client, they have a list of requirements. The others, like SAP and Dynamics, most of the time, they answer with 6 or 7 different software. And they have to integrate things. And so it gets very complex and it costs a lot. With Odoo, it's different because we cover so much in standard, because we have 30,000 apps from the community app store, the largest app store in the world. We can deliver all these things in a single platform. So not only the customer has a better solution because everything is integrated, including his point of sale, his e-commerce, business intelligence, and so on, but also it's much easier to implement because integration costs a lot.
When you have customers that implement Odoo, they don't necessarily need to have a super deep technical competency in-house to be able to support a product like this. I mean, they could still use it sort of similar to how they would use an off-the-shelf system. Is that correct?
Yeah, and it's you're right, and it's actually what we want to do. We want to commoditize the ERP market. When I started, ERP costed a lot of money, even for small company. You had to 50,000 euro, 100,000 euro, even for the small companies. What we want to do is to make it affordable for everyone. And so for that, we need things to work out of the box and to cover all the things that the majority of the customer need. But on top of having all the features available out of the box, we also have like a large app store, so we can use apps from the community. And also Odoo Studio that allows you to customize with a few drag and drops so that you can do customization without going on the development side. And of course, obviously, if you need even more for the very large, when you start to get with 1,000, 2,000 users, you always have developments. And that there you can develop. And the good thing with open source is that we are based on modern technologies. I mean, it's Python, PostgreSQL, so developments are much easier than traditional software.
Right. Now, how has open source, or Odoo in particular, how has Odoo evolved over the years? I mean, what are some of the major advancements you've seen in open source in general, but more specifically to Odoo, the biggest leaps or improvements you've seen in the...
Yeah, every year the product is very, very different. If you have followed Odoo from version 10, 11, it's the gaps are really big. Look at the traditional ERPs from year to year, they always look the same. Sometimes with a different design, but you still have these complex, bloated things, where Odoo is different. The way I see the thing is that a few years ago, 10 years ago, the complexity was to have to manage the business process and to have your accounting data consolidated from all the departments. That was what all the traditional ERPs tried to do. And they did it, and it works well. They support most of the core business process. But the thing is, now we have to go much further. And what we do at Odoo is not only support the business process, of course, is to really have a productivity tools for every employee. We want the worker in the shop floor to be more efficient, the accountant to do less manual recording, or the cashier for retailers that have better tools. And that's where I believe we went much faster than all the others, because nobody's there yet. They are all very painful to use, whereas Odoo is extremely simple and fast, because we focused on that since now 5 or 7 years, while the other were still trying to go on the cloud.
Yeah, that is a big liability of some of those legacy ERP vendors for sure.
Yeah.
What are some of the benefits of open source in general? You know, when you talk about open, and I think you've alluded to this in some of your...
There is still a benefit. So what I said, it's not very different from traditional software as a customer point of view. As a development point of view, it's very different, because we have close to 100,000 people who lives on Odoo. It's their full-time job. So we get feedback from all around the world, contributions, and so on. So as a development point of view, it allows the product to grow faster. But there is still a very big advantage for the customer, is that there is no lock-in. One of the main issues that customers have with traditional ERP is the big lock-in. You never know what's going to be the price. The price might increase year after year. It's not easy to switch technology. It's not easy to find consultant that knows the technology. The thing with open source is that it's taught in a lot of universities, so you have resources all around the world. It's open, so students can learn, or people can learn even without having to be partner with a large name. And also because with Odoo specifically, when you have 80% open source and 20% for a fee, the customer has access to the source code. So we don't lock in for every time he needs something. If, for instance, we are too expensive, he can just ask someone else. And so that creates a pressure on the price, and as a result, the price of the subscription is much lower, because we cannot afford to charge the same price than the others do, because our biggest competitor is our open source product.
Right. And who is your biggest competitor?
It's Odoo Community. So we have Odoo Enterprise that we sell, and Odoo Community is our open source product. It's our biggest community. If we lose a deal, they go for the free version. Maybe I should. It's not totally true. Also, when that's for the pressure on the price. On the market, I don't consider that we have a competitor. So obviously, there are plenty of players on this market. There are hundreds of ERPs and business apps and so on. But despite the fact that SAP or Microsoft spend billions of dollars to reach the SMEs market, they all failed. I mean, for the small companies, the equipment rate is barely nothing. For the mid-sized companies, it's 18% equipment rate, despite the fact that everyone tried. So basically, nobody succeeded, including us. We didn't succeed neither. We do less than 1% of the market. So the way I see the thing is that we are not fighting against competitors, because nobody succeeded to make something affordable and real productivity tools for the employees. We are trying to do something that nobody did before. We are trying to make management software accessible, affordable, and real productivity tools where the users save time instead of losing time recording data in a system. And that's something that nobody succeeded to do. So for me, it's not about the technical fighting about a competitor. It's more a technical challenge that we have to crack.
So that's a partial clip of my interview with Fabian, the CEO and founder of Odoo. He's someone that is very good at marketing, very good at product development. He's got a vision for what his product can be and how it fits in the market. So he's a really interesting guy. And if you'd like to watch the full interview, you can go to the link below. You can watch the full interview from my podcast. And if you'd like to see clips from other tech titans and other technology influencers and technology leaders in the space, this is just a partial list that I've shared with you here today. In my weekly podcast, I'm constantly trying to talk to new and different, diverse technology leaders. You can go to transformationgroundcontrol.com to see all the past episodes of that show that we do every week. And there's, at this point of filming, there's about 165 different episodes of that show, so be sure to check that out. And if you'd like to learn more about technology in general, you can also check out our website at thirdstage-consulting.com. And there's a ton of resources there in our resource center that'll help you as you evaluate different technology trends and different technology considerations you might have as you plan for your digital transformation or your career in digital transformation. So I hope you found this information useful and hope you have a great day. But what I love about talking to Evan, talk about some of the, no, let me say that again. In NetSuite world, in wherever I was, I don't know. Oh, the cloud was probably going to become a thing, and a thing.